Every once in a while, you'll finish watching a series and feel as though it left you with something, some thought or idea that you didn't possess before, and one that perhaps resonates with you in a special way. Now, not every series can do this. Sure, you may be able to get something other than entertainment out of the majority of shows you watch, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a message you derive is relevant to you in any way. And as such, many of these ideas and themes don't hold much personal value. So when you do happen to come across a series that resonates with you in some way, you become very attached to it. Today we shall be reviewing the 49 episode anime series known as Clannad, and hopefully what I say here today will have some form of impact on you. Clannad starts off in a somewhat large town with all your usual townly attributes. There are residential areas, stores, arcades, bakeries, and of course, high schools. Because really, what would anime be without high school? We're introduced to our main protagonist, Tomoya Okazaki, a senior at one of said high schools who finds himself lost. Well, not in a literal way, he knows where he is, in a town that he absolutely despises, wandering through a rather uneventful life with few objectives or goals for the future. See, at a young age, Tomoya lost his mother in a car accident, which threw his father headlong into a seemingly inescapable depression. As such, his father drinks his days away while wallowing in his own filth and self-pity. Because of this, Tomoya and his father don't get along particularly well. This, combined with his mother's death, gives Tomoya his hatred for the town he lives in, due to his family problems, being stuck in a place he hates, and also having an injury to his right shoulder that robbed him of his ability to play basketball. Tomoya has very little left to enjoy in life, at least how he sees it. Naturally, because of this, he doesn't really care all that much about school either. He arrives late, skips classes, does poorly grades-wise, and ultimately gets labeled a delinquent. Sure, he still goes to school each day, but more so out of habit than anything else. He really doesn't have much desire to go there, but he still needs some form of routine in order to give his life structure, even though that way of living still lacks much purpose. That is until he meets a girl by the name of Nagisa Furukawa, or Nagisa, if you happen to watch the show in Japanese. We'll get to that little controversy a little bit later on. Nagisa is best described as someone with a weak constitution, and I say that because that is exactly how the show describes her. And she has a weak constitution in both a physical and emotional sense. She's been afflicted with a disease ever since she was young that recurs every winter and makes her unbelievably weak and bedridden for long stretches of time. In fact, the last time the disease struck her, she ended up missing too many days to graduate, and as such was forced to repeat her senior year. Because of this, she now knows no one in her grade since all her friends from the previous year have graduated, leaving Nagisa with mixed feelings about school in general. The environment has become foreign to her. Combine this with the fact that she's very shy and has an extreme lack of confidence, and you end up with a person who often can't find the internal strength to even walk up the hill that separates her from school each morning. Until, of course, she meets Tomoya, who on a whim throws her some words of encouragement, which happen to give her the strength to follow him up to school. From here, their lives begin to intertwine until eventually they end up together. Because you see, Clannad is based on a visual novel created by Key, and Nagisa happens to be the main heroine. Because of this, the first season of Clannad, when simplified down, is similar to many other visual novel adaptations of this sort. The male protagonist, Tomoya, as time goes on, becomes surrounded by multiple female characters, each of which hold their own complex and in many cases tragic problems that Tomoya ultimately helps them with. You would then, playing as Tomoya in this visual novel, choose which heroine you want to end up with by making certain choices and decisions in regards to each of them. But because this is an anime, and not a visual novel, that form of mechanics can't really be applied, at least not successfully. And so because Tomoya can only end up with one of them, the main heroine, Nagisa, is chosen to fill this role, while the other girls only become friends with him. Now this really only becomes an issue if you happen to like one of the other heroines more than Nagisa, and would have preferred for Tomoya to end up with them. Otherwise, you should enjoy the romance between the two of them, because in my humble opinion, it is handled exceptionally well. Nagisa and Tomoya in some ways are very similar. Though having very different reasons for this at the beginning of the series, both characters lack much interest in school or even in the future in general, which gives them a very similar internal predicament that the presence of each other helps to resolve. But to a much larger degree, the two of them complement each other by possessing the beneficial qualities that the other sorely lacks and needs. Nagisa lacks confidence, something Tomoya is able to provide her with over the course of the series, especially in the first season, where he gives her the strength and support to complete her goal of restarting the school's drama club, which had been on hiatus since the previous year. Tomoya, on the other hand, can't find anything worthwhile in his life until Nagisa enters it. In other words, Nagisa has a goal in restarting the drama club, but lacks the strength to do it, while Tomoya has some inner strength, but lacks any real objective with which to pursue. So while he gives her confidence, she provides him with a reason for being, which becomes very important in the show's second season. Because yes, unlike many other love stories, Clannad has 2 seasons, with the first one serving to allow Nagisa and Tomoya to end up together, while the second season, titled Clannad After Story, focuses on their lives together after they both graduate, which really is a rare thing to come across, at least in anime. So many series end with the 2 leads just confessing their love for each other, and because of this we never get to find out how their relationship develops, or even if it lasts. Thus, After Story becomes the component that makes Clannad so much more than just your typical high school love story. We get to witness the struggles our leads face in getting jobs, finding a place to live, and trying to start a family together. As a result, After Story becomes a bit of an awakening experience, because gone are the more carefree days of high school. Now Tomoya and Nagisa have to contend with the stress and struggles of adult life, which is something many young adults tend to fear, it seems, and rightfully so. The idea of having all these new responsibilities, like working and paying bills, weighing on your shoulders, can be extremely frightening, and that's understandable. But the manner in which After Story presents these struggles, and the characters' methods for overcoming them, makes that transition into adulthood seem not so scary. One of the central ideas of After Story becomes that no matter how tiring, stressful, overwhelming, or tragic life may get, as long as you have something or someone there for you to push through all of it for, then you'll be alright in the end. And so Clannad becomes in many ways a story of how to overcome the many undesirable events and tragedies that very well may occur in one's life, which is a really neat idea to tackle. Now, notice I said the word tragedies. Oh, is Clannad tragic? Even more so than similar visual novel adaptations like Air or Canon. And After Story is really where this becomes apparent. Not because the first season didn't have sad moments, because it did. After Story just takes it to a whole other level, especially with how frequently these tragedies start to occur. And even when the series isn't being necessarily tragic, there are still a myriad of emotional moments sprinkled throughout in order to transform this series into a seemingly unending roller coaster of feelings, which very well may not be your cup of tea, as it were. So if romances or drama-heavy series aren't something you tend to like, then Clannad probably won't be for you. For everyone else, though, even with all of the tragedies that take place in this series, I would hope that you would still be able to find something meaningful out of this series as a whole, and out of those tragedies specifically. Now, the ending of the series may also be a debatable point for some. See, like other key visual novels, see the aforementioned Air and Canon, Clannad involves supernatural aspects in some way. However, these aspects play a fairly limited role for the majority of Clannad's run, unlike in Air and Canon, where they are very present. And this is especially the case for Air, but that's a story for another time. Because of this, the supernatural aspects never feel overbearing in any way. It also helps that because Clannad takes place over the course of many years, the supernatural aspects are able to be developed gradually and aren't just thrown at you left and right in a short time span. In addition, all of the supernatural stuff that occurs is in some way related to each other, with the exception of one aspect that occurs early on in the series, but thankfully, that particular event gets a fairly adequate explanation as to what it is, so ultimately, I have no issue with its presence. Anyway, getting back to the ending. Without going into major spoilers, Clannad's main supernatural attribute plays an important role in the series' conclusion, which may bother some people who are looking for a more realistic ending to the events of the series. Personally, I love the ending, and it left me extremely satisfied, but I can still see what aspects of it bothered some people. Ultimately, it wasn't a problem for me, and considering how the events of After Story play out, I think the majority of people will like the ending too. Since I've already talked about Tomoya and Nagisa, let's go into some of the other main characters, and by other main characters, I basically mean the other heroines. First, we have Fuko Ibuki, a short girl in her first year who happens to love two things more than anything else: her sister and starfish. No, really, starfish. To the owner of the white sedan, you left your lights on. No, but seriously, she's really obsessed with starfish, to the point that she spends all of her free time carving starfish out of wood, while getting a plethora of cuts on her hands along the way. However, there is in fact a method to her madness. Well, kinda. Fuko intends to use these wooden starfish as invitations to her beloved sister's upcoming wedding. So Tomoya and Nagisa assist her by helping to distribute these invitations to the other students, in order to get as many people as possible to attend. However, as their ambitions become more successful, people seem to start forgetting about Fuko. They find these wooden starfish in their possession, but can't seem to remember how or where they got them. Which is pretty interesting, yes? Next we have Kotomi Ichinose, a timid girl with a reputation for being unbelievably smart. So smart, in fact, that the school doesn't even require her to take regular classes, instead allowing her to wander the premises as she wishes. Kotomi instead spends most of her time in the library reading books. Because of this, however, she has very poor social skills and thus very few friends. That is, until Tomoya stumbles across her one day and tries to get her to reach out more and meet other people. However, that isn't such a simple task, as Kotomi has a rather painful past that in many ways she'd like to forget, which tends to get in the way of this ambition. And yet, no matter how many times she may want to forget, she ultimately isn't able to. Or rather, she isn't willing to. Tomoyo Sakagami comes next, and yes, her first name is spelled exactly the same as Tomoya's, just with an O at the end instead of an A. Yay, lazy naming! Tomoyo is a rather violent person in simplest terms. She's very skilled in fighting, and as such doesn't take a lot of shit from people she has no patience for. Interestingly, her personality is a lot more calm and reserved than you might expect from a violent person. Like, she isn't quiet at all, but she certainly isn't hot-blooded either, which is pretty neat to see in this type of character. Tomoyo's story effectively goes like this. She's a transfer student in her second year, with a past history she'd very much so like to put behind her. It's rumored that she once was the leader of a gang before she transferred, which is how she developed these methods of fighting. And this checkered history becomes a problem due to her current ambition to become student council president in order to prevent the destruction of the nearby cherry blossom trees. Because she holds a personal attachment to these trees, and as such wants to prevent them from being destroyed at all costs, she needs to attain this coveted office of student council president, since it would give her the power and influence to keep them alive. Rounding out the heroines, we have Kyo Fujibayashi and Ro Fujibayashi, twins who not only share a similar appearance, but also a similar lack of focus or development. Kyo is another violent character, but with the more traditional hot-blooded emotional state that is expected of that type of character. In reality, she's a tsundere, but one that's more commonly violent than lovey-dovey. Not that she isn't lovey-dovey, it's just that her aggressive attributes tend to stand out a bit more. Her sister Ro is almost the exact opposite. She's very shy and timid, and is in no way whatsoever aggressive. But because of how shy she is, she has a lot of difficulty getting what she wants, which is usually where Kyo comes in to try and help her get those things. Most notably being Ro's desire to confess her love for Tomoya, though as it's implied throughout the series, Kyo very well may have feelings of her own for him. The biggest problem with the twins, and Tomoyo as well, is the fact that the three of them are never given proper arcs in the story. See, most visual novel adaptations of this sort tend to give each heroine an arc, and thus advance the story by moving from one arc to another and subsequently focusing on one girl at a time. Clannad somewhat does this by giving Fuko and Kotomi their own defined arcs, but fails to provide ones for Kyo, Ro, or Tomoyo. And part of this seems to be due to the arcs that these heroines had in the visual novel being very dependent on Tomoya ending up with them, especially Kyo's arc. And because of this, when you take that away, because Tomoya can't end up with them, you aren't left with much story to give these heroines. Fuko and Kotomi's stories didn't rely on that aspect as much, and as such, they are given arcs that focus heavily on them. And of course, Nagisa gets plenty of focus because she's the love interest, but the other heroines just aren't as lucky, unfortunately. This also may have to do with Clannad's main plot for the first season, that being the restoration of the drama club, being so heavily linked to Nagisa that whenever the show decides to focus on another heroine, the main plot isn't really being addressed in any direct manner. And this creates a need for additional episodes outside of Nagisa's actual story arc that focus on the drama club. And so this takes up time and makes it so that the other three heroines don't really get all that much. Really, Tomoyo gets maybe 2 episodes to focus on her, and Kyo and Ro get like 1 combined. Unlike a show like Canon, for example, where each heroine's arc advanced the main plot, with the exception of one of the heroines. But anyway, only episodes that focus on Nagisa are really able to advance the plot in Clannad. Canon could just go from one arc to another and have the main plot be advanced. Clannad couldn't do that. Now, this isn't to say that the other heroines are irrelevant to the plot, because many of them do play roles in it, but when the other heroines are the main focus, the plot becomes secondary, as opposed to always having a relevance with each heroine, as is the case with Canon. Well, as I said, 4 out of the 5 heroines. And this is probably my biggest problem with Clannad, the fact that some of these heroines ultimately feel like they're just kind of there. They may play roles, but playing roles doesn't make you a character, it makes you a plot device. And to a degree, I don't mind this, because I greatly appreciate that Nagisa got all the additional focus that she did. In fact, she even plays large roles in the arcs that don't directly focus on her, by having her help Tomoya out with the problems of characters like Fuko and Gotomi. And while some of the other heroines like Kyo and Ro help out too during these arcs, they're never given the same development as Nagisa does, and they don't help out to the same degree that she does. And in relation to Nagisa and Tomoya's relationship, this is great, because it makes their going from friends to significant others feel a lot more natural and gradual and just realistic. And it gives the romance some sort of relevance for even the arcs that Nagisa is effectively a secondary character. To make up for some of the heroines getting very little focus, there exists 2 OVAs, one present at the end of each season. Each of these OVAs take place in their own alternate universe, separate from each other and from that of the main story. Both OVAs effectively serve as what-if scenarios in which Tomoya ends up with someone else, with the first OVA focusing on Tomoyo and the second OVA focusing on Kyo and Ro. And in each OVA, all the other heroines, with the exception of the ones being focused on, don't exist, or at the very least, they aren't relevant to Tomoya's life, and so don't get in the way. Now, while these OVAs do indeed help, and give these neglected characters some of the much-needed focus they need, wow, that sounded really redundant, okay. I'm gonna go with that. When you try and cram an entire story arc into one episode, as what happens with these OVAs, you're bound to have some issues. But there's still something, and I'm grateful that they exist, even if I would have liked to have seen more for these characters, because they don't get proper arcs still. They get summaries of what their arcs could have been. But as I said, that's still something, and I am very grateful these OVAs exist, as opposed to us not having anything at all. Concerning animation, Clannad's was done by none other than Kyoto Animation, known for their adaptations of Air, Canon, K-On!, Haruhi Suzumiya, and, etc. And like most of their productions, Clannad has a rather high animation value. The characters feel very fluid in their appearance and their movements, and the backgrounds tend to look very detailed and visually appealing, which really helps to set the mood for many scenes. However, a big point of contention with Clannad's animation concerns the design of the female characters, specifically their eyes, which are very detailed and very big. To the point where these eyes take up around half of the characters' faces, and this may turn some people away at first. And you know what, that's kind of understandable. If you're 100% certain that you will not be able to stand these characters' eyes, that's fine. But if you're only wary, I strongly suggest you at least give them a shot, because that type of facial design tends to grow on you rather quickly. At least in my experience, because at first when I watched Air, for example, which also has rather large eyes for the characters, I thought I wouldn't like it, and I got used to it after like an episode, so it's not that big of a deal, even if you think it will be. I'd also like to address some of the beautiful animation quality presented in some specific scenes. Every few episodes, the story will move away from the main plot and setting and spend 5 or so minutes focusing on a young girl and a robot in a different world, seemingly without humans. Now, these scenes do in fact become relevant to the main story, so if you don't find them super interesting at first, please stick with them, because if you skip over them, you're going to be unhappy at the end. But what I want to bring attention to is the animation that is used for these scenes. Like, holy crap, do these scenes look amazing. You can tell a lot of time and money was spent on these scenes, and the higher quality of animation not only looks fantastic, but also serves to really cement the idea that this is a different world from the one where the main story takes place. And I really like that. In relation to sound, Clannad sports 2 openings and 2 endings, one for each season, if you couldn't figure that one out. The endings have a lot of charm to them, with the first one being pretty unique as far as typical endings go. And the openings, in my opinion, are freaking fantastic. They do the regular thing that similar anime visual novel adaptations tend to do by showing off the main heroines with the names underneath them and all of that, with again some very high animation quality, but the songs themselves are amazing in their own right, especially the second opening theme. And if you ever get the chance, look up the lyrics to that opening after you've finished watching the series, because you'll realize just how fitting the second opening song is to the events of the series. The background music and insert songs Clannad utilizes throughout its run not only help to emphasize the emotion in the scenes they're playing during, but also have enough strength as songs or instrumentals to stand on their own. And that's what you want from background music. You want it to be able to stand on its own and be able to be listened to without the series there to accompany it. And these songs are able to do that. As far as the dub is concerned, there are quite a few controversies over the dub Clannad received. Now, I do not have the same disdain for Sentai Filmworks that I know a lot of people do. While their dubs do tend to have some issues, mostly in relation to technical problems like matching lip flaps every now and then, they are, for the most part, still good dubs. And I personally have enjoyed a great number of Sentai's dubs, Clannad's included. Now, there are a handful of scenes where the dialogue is too large to match the character's lip flaps, and those situations are not ideal. But my biggest qualm with dialogue not matching lip flaps is when it occurs so frequently that it becomes distracting and takes me out of the show because I keep noticing them. With Clannad, I only noticed these issues a handful of times, like 2 times to be exact, so it wasn't all that distracting. Now, there very well could have been other instances where they didn't match up and I just didn't notice it, but that means it really wasn't all that big of an issue. Because if I didn't notice them, it didn't distract me, and if it didn't distract me, I don't have an issue with it. My only problem with lip flaps not matching up is when it becomes a distraction, and it takes me out of the show. And if I don't notice them, it doesn't take me out of the show. I only noticed it twice with Clannad, so really I don't mind the fact that the lip flaps didn't always match up with the dialogue. Ideally, it would have happened all the time, sure. But it really just didn't bother me all that much. There's also controversy over the pronunciation of some of the characters' names, most notably using the pronunciation Nagisa instead of Nagisa. Really, I don't mind this, since you're just putting the emphasis on the gi instead of the na, which, really, I mean, this isn't a new issue when going from a Japanese show and, giving it an English track and trying to figure out how to pronounce certain names. It happened with Attack on Titan recently, for example, where if you watched a certain character in the sub, you pronounced her name Mikasa. If you watched her in the dub, you pronounced her name Mikasa. So, I mean, first of all, because Attack on Titan was a Funimation dub and not a Sentai dub, this isn't just an issue that Sentai has. This is something that can happen, and I don't find it to be that big of an issue. Especially since I didn't watch the sub, and I have no intention to ever watch the sub. Because of that, I'm never going to be in a situation where I am watching Clannad and I hear Nagisa's name pronounced Nagisa, and I'm expecting it to be the other pronunciation. This is only going to be an issue if you have watched Clannad already in one form and then intend to go and watch the other form. Because otherwise, you're never going to end up hearing both pronunciations. You're either just going to hear Nagisa or you're either just going to hear Nagisa. Bottom line, I have no attachment to the pronunciation of the name as Nagisa because I never watched this show subbed, and I never will. And the issue is only going to arise if you plan to go from one version to the other, in which case, just keep it in mind. Just understand that if you're going from watching the show in Japanese and now you're going to watch it in English, just be aware that it's going to be pronounced Nagisa and not Nagisa. And so, I mean, some people are just going to completely hate the dub because it changes that one thing, because it doesn't do exactly what the Japanese version does. And you know what? That's fine. If you're someone who wants to watch your anime subbed, go and watch Clannad subbed. If you're someone who likes to watch anime dubbed, you're going to have no issue with Clannad's dub. At least I don't think so. And if you're someone who's on the fence, please try and overlook this one thing. Because really, if you were to just pass on the dub entirely, I think you're going to miss out on some really, truly amazing performances, and that'd be a real shame. In fact, the dub's greatest asset is just how strong some of these performances are for the main characters. Now, sure, some of the one-off background characters aren't given the best performances, but that's a minor issue. They're on the screen for like 2 seconds and they're gone, so I really don't care about that. The actual important characters in the series are given such strong performances, especially during the moments of emotion and tragedy, that I can forgive all the other issues this dub has. And it isn't just prominent voice actors that do well. The lesser-known ones provide great and memorable performances. At least that's how I felt about them. And I want to give special attention to Lucy Christian's performance as Nagisa and David Matranga's performance as Tomoya. Lucy Christian has voiced many characters over the years, but her performance as Nagisa is undoubtedly my favorite. And it's kind of funny because shy and quiet characters are a rather stark contrast to the usually hot-blooded types of characters that Lucy Christian tends to voice. But she voices her, and she voices her perfectly, to the point where I'm not sure any other voice actress could have done a better job than she did. Now, David Matranga's Tomoya is able to bring out the snarky and indifferent attitude that he has at certain moments, but also the strong and serious attitude he has in others. But no matter what scene he's trying to do, his performance always felt very solid and powerful to me, almost as though Matranga got Tomoya and was feeling the trials and tribulations of the story along with him. Honestly, David Matranga is quickly becoming one of my favorite voice actors, and I can't think of a bad performance I've ever heard him give. And he really does deserve to get more praise than I feel he does. Before moving on to closing remarks, I would like to very briefly address the existence of the Clannad film adaptation released by Toei Animation about a month or so before the series first aired in Japan. The film, unlike the adaptation of Air's film that was also done by Toei, doesn't really work out. I mean, both films take a lot of liberties with the source material in order to condense the story down into a film that's under 2 hours. But unlike Air's film, whose liberties actually fixed 95% of the problems that the series had, Clannad's film's liberties either don't really help or they hinder the film by hurting it very significantly. The film also rushes the love story between Nagisa and Tomoya so much so that it feels unbelievably forced. And that's not good when the love story is such a large focal point of what you're trying to do. Plus the animation really isn't that good, which is surprising for a film which you'd think would have a rather large animation budget and all. And it's even more surprising when you consider that Air's film, which came out more than 2 years before Clannad's film, looks great. Like, what the hell happened? So, yeah. And really, this film is a summary of what happens in Clannad with making a lot of changes, and these changes don't really help it, unlike Air's film, which you should check out Air's film, is what I'm trying to say. Don't watch this film. Just give it a pass. It's not going to give you anything that the series won't give you and give you better. And so, in accordance with everything I have just said, I shall be bestowing upon Clannad a score of 9.46 out of 10, and as such, I designate this series to be amazing. Clannad is so much more than just a love story. Not that love stories are bad by any means, but it's able to do so much more, especially considering its source material. And that is fully deserving of a designation of amazing, at least in my book. And as such, I fully recommend that you buy this series as soon as you can. And you can buy this series on both Blu-ray and DVD from Sentai Filmworks. However, you can't get both seasons in like one complete series package. You have to get season 1 and then season 2, which is somewhat unfortunate, but yeah, no, more so inconvenient than unfortunate, I suppose. And if you happen to want to stream this series instead of buy it, or perhaps watch a few episodes before committing money and taking the plunge on an actual purchase, you can watch all of Clannad, both seasons, on Hulu, however, only in subtitled form. As far as other anime that very well may suit you if you happen to enjoy Clannad, I recommend first Canon 2006 and secondly Toradora. Canon because it is very similar to Clannad in its basic structure and the fact that it was a key visual novel and the fact that it was adapted by Kyoto Animation, at least the second time. There is a 2002 series by Toei that you should skip. Just watch the 2006 one, trust me. And Toradora is another love story, though it is a much more realistic one because it doesn't have any supernatural aspects to it, but it's still a very fulfilling love story, and so I think both of these will suit you very well if you happen to enjoy Clannad, or maybe you've seen one of these two, and if you have and you enjoyed them, then that should be a good indication that you will like Clannad. So yeah, that's the review. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully it's not terrible. It's probably terrible, but yeah, but seriously, hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully it influenced you in some way. Hopefully it's helped you figure out whether or not you want to watch this show or not, or maybe you've found this to be an outlet where you can either find an opinion that justifies yours, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe I've just made you angry by having a different opinion. Who knows? It's the internet, that stuff happens. But anyway, until next time, I don't know when next time will be. I don't know what show it will be that I do. But yeah, until then, hopefully you've enjoyed this review. Hopefully you all stay safe, and hopefully I've impacted you in some way with this video. Take care. I'll see you next time.